All right, greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to the RecPoker podcast, the YouTube video. My name is Steve Fredlund, and as always, we are sponsored by Running Aces Racetrack and Casino, and this is episode 126. And tonight, we actually don't have a guest expert with us. It's just going to be the rec players having some great discussion. And I know one of the things we're going to talk about is how do we play when we hit trips on a paired board? So we're going to talk about those things. A couple of quick announcements. I know a number of you are part of the Crazy Like a Fox, and we're about halfway through that deal already, just having a great time. You can still join late and get access to the videos if you want. Otherwise, feel free to shoot me a note if you have any questions on that deal. We do plan on making the videos available at some future point so more people can join in on what has been, I think, a very good learning process. A couple of things from our sponsor, Running Aces. The Spring Poker Classic ended this past weekend. Ty Van Din taking down first place. It was a $500 buy-in, and he took home about 35 grand on just sort of a star-studded final table. So a very good final table, but congratulations to Ty. They also ran this double stack series during the Spring Poker Classic, and the folks that won some bonus money because of the points, they gave a certain amount of points for how you finished. They added up all those points, and they gave a bonus of up to $2,500. Peter Herr, Brandon Kelsenberg, and Clint Leithizer. Congrats to you guys. And the player of the week last week, Nathan Hernke, Anthony Burtz, Randy Smith, and Jay Brousseau. So congrats to all of you folks out there. So with that, let's turn it over. Let's have some cool discussion. What do y'all say? We're joined by at least Rob and Chris and John and Stacy. We've got Jack down there too. So it should be a good discussion. And I'm just going to turn it right over to Chris Jones, who had an idea for this topic. So Chris, take it away, and thanks, man.
Yeah, sure. This is basically time to pick me apart, but I feel like I've been playing a lot. I think this has been happening to me a lot, where I've been hitting trips on the flop. I feel really good about myself, and then I seem to run into some trouble. And I'm curious about these spots. Like sometimes, it's pretty obvious, and sometimes it's not. But so I'll just start with, I have 3 hands. We'll see if we can get through all of them, but we can just kind of talk through them. But so spoiler alert, they're all going to be, we're all going to flop. So I don't think it's pretty controversial what I did to start. So it's just, I'm in the cutoff. I opened to 5,500. I have about 210,000 here. The button with 122,000 calls me, and I'm describing him as a John Deerish type player. And then the big blind comes along as well. And then the flop is, I have ace of clubs, 5 of clubs, and the flop is ace of hearts, ace of diamonds, 9 of hearts. And I guess I would stop there and see what people think. Well, and then it checks to me.
Before we get too far, where are we at in the tournament? It seems like stacks are pretty deep. Are we at final table, near final table, near money bubble? What are we looking at?
We're past the bubble, but I think we've got 3 tables left. So we're pretty far along here. But it's not, we're not into like final table situation yet.
Okay, but we're pretty deep. It looks like we have about 80 bigs. Yep. We're in the cutoff with about 80. The button.
The rest of these stacks on here aren't correct. I just did the players who are in the hand.
Relevant.
Everyone is pretty deep here.
So for those that are on just the podcast, so we're in the cutoff with maybe 80 bigs or so, roughly. The button, the John Deerish guy has, 60 bigs roughly, and then the big blind has us out chipped.
Yep.
Okay, so we're really deep here, especially late in the tournament.
Yep. These are the 3 biggest stacks at the table.
Okay, and you opened up with ace 5 of clubs and from the cutoff to a little like 2.5x or something.
Yep.
Okay.
So 2 callers going to the flop. We hit 2 aces, so we're feeling pretty good about ourselves. And we get a check from the big blind, and then I go ahead and lead out pretty small for about 5,000.
So it's about a quarter pot or so, a little over a quarter pot. Okay.
I don't know what people think about that or that sizing.
Yeah. What do you guys think? So a quarter pot hitting trips with ace 5.
I think this deep stacked, I would want to go a little bit bigger. given that you've hit some value here.
What's the rationale for because of the stack size? Because you're trying to get stacks in if it comes to that, or
Not
why bigger
necessarily
because of
getting
the
stacks in, but if everyone was shallow stacked, it would be easy to get stacks in by betting small and kind of keeping in people in the pot. With a flush draw out there, possibility of a bigger ace, whatever it may be. I don't know. I would just probably size up my bet. I'd probably go closer to 10, 11, 12,000, something like that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, like, so the sizing up, is it related to the flush draw, or is it related to because stack size you want to get as much value as you can? Do you want to? Is it
Probably as
about
much
trying to?
value as I can. It's for
Okay.
value. It's not like for protection or as a
Yeah.
bluff or anything. It's like this is a value bet, and I want to get as much value as I can.
So if it's a rainbow flop, you same bet sizing.
I mean, we still hit 2 aces.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying
Yeah.
if it's like the 9 of spades or something.
Yeah, sure. I'm still doing that.
Okay, so the bet size isn't based for you, at least in this spot, on the suitedness of the board.
Not particularly, no.
Okay.
And then I'll just let you. So the button calls, and this player is really tight, and has only got this big of a stack because they hit like set over set, and it was like a ton of chips went in. So their stack came in all at once, but otherwise they've been really not coming along with hands. They have not shown much aggression, and so here they are. They call, and the big blind calls as well. And so then we go to the turn, which is the 4 of clubs. And I guess
What's
my action, so it checks to me.
Do you want to chat at all about kind of what's going through your mind once you get called in 2 spots there?
So the big blind I'm not too worried about at this point. I feel like if the big blind had something stronger at this point, we would have heard about it. I'm really putting them almost pretty strongly on a hard draw. And the John Deerish player sticking around really worries me. But I'm not quite sure. Like better aces, maybe ace 9, some of those kinds of hands I'm starting to get a little bit worried about. But I still feel like I've got a bet for value here.
Do you think like John Deere, do you think he is the kind of player that would stick around with flush draw? Do you think he'd stick around with like pocket 7s, pocket 8s, that kind of stuff?
I mean, flush draw, if it was a good one, probably. I think pocket 7s or pocket 8s is not, that player is not sticking around at all.
Yeah. What about like 10s or jacks?
Yeah, probably 10s or jacks.
Okay.
But I think,
10s
or jacks.
Right, that's the question. But if he's pretty tight, he might not 3-bet pre with 10s or jacks, right?
Right.
So at this end, I'm just thinking. So it's a flush draw, or it's some sort of a made hand. Obviously, there's no straight draws out there.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got some random 9, or he's got some pocket pair that he's getting a little sticky with, or an ace, obviously.
I think what's going on here is going back to your flop bet. It was so small that they didn't need that big of a hand to come along because the pot was so big at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think by betting bigger, you're going to they're going to call you if they feel they have a little value either way, and if they don't, they're going to fold either way, right?
Right.
So if they're going to call you when they think they have value, that you need to bet a little bigger to put a little more money in the pot, because you are going to assume that you have a lot more equity than they do at this point in time. So that's why I think a bigger bet to begin with, and that would better define your hand at the same time when you get to the turn. You're going to know if they both called a bigger bet. Now you can start to really narrow down their range a little bit. Their range could be still pretty wide open just because of the size of your bet on the flop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So, so then it checks to me. and I still feel like I need to bet here. And I'm deciding to size it up to so I bet 25,000.
So that's sort of the down bet that we've been talking about a little bit, where you're betting small on the flop and then you're kind of putting the hammer down on the turn.
Right.
Because that was about, for those on the audio, that was probably what, 3/4? It was 25,000 into 36,000.
Yeah. So it's about
Okay.
2/3 pot.
Yep. I mean, this should certainly help define your hand. To Rob's point, at this point the guy has 117,000, so it's a quarter of his stack. What do you guys think of bet sizing?
I like it. I think like you said, you feel that you're still ahead, and regardless of the size of your bet, if they don't have a hand that they feel they can continue with, they're going to fold either way. So you're not going to get any value out of that. So you might as well go for the value. And yeah, I don't know. The draws are going to stick around. And you want that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You think the draws will stick? You think 2 hearts sticks around with that bet sizing?
Yeah, I think they still can.
Okay,
I don't think John Deerish can stick around with a flush draw, but the big blind potentially could.
Just because of his stack size?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you're starting to threaten his stack where he'd have to call off. I mean, what is that, like 20, 25% of his stack?
Right.
On a draw.
Yeah, and if he only has 9 outs, he's got 18% equity. Yeah.
All right. And so the action is probably the opposite of what I wanted to have happen, which is that John Deerish calls and the big blind folds. And the river is the queen of spades. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I've been called twice by the tightest player at the table, and I'm not feeling very good about my hand anymore. But I don't know. This is the type of situation where I feel like I really messed up this hand, and I'm kind of curious what others think. Before I show you what I did, I'm kind of curious what you would do now.
Yeah, I'm for sure. I mean, honestly, I'm probably check calling turn, but that's too tight, and I lose too much value there to like flush draws and stuff. But I'm probably for sure check, maybe folding, maybe calling. But I'm hoping to check call here, maybe a bet of 30,000 or something. But I'm probably, and I think I lose value in this spot. So I'm not saying it's the right play, but I would probably check with the intention of calling, but maybe folding if I just sense strength, because there's, obviously there's only one ace left. There's only one ace left, but. He's called me every street, so it feels like he's got a made hand. He wasn't on a straight draw. On a flush draw, I'm not going to get any value unless he decides to bet it. If I check it, if I bet this and he has on a missed flush draw, I'm not going to get value, but I maybe get value if he turns it into a bluff. So that's sort of my play here is check, probably call.
How confident are you in your read of John Deere?
Probably. Of all the players at the table, I'm the most confident of my read of this player. He's just been really ABC. Like, if he hits a hand, he goes with it, and if not, he's really kind of getting out. And I haven't seen a lot of creativity out of this player.
Because as you describe him, if he's a true John Deere player, the way I think of them, then at this point in time, he's not calling you with anything other than an ace. And if he has an ace, at best, you're going to be chopping, and it's likely you're behind. However, everyone will go off the deep end occasionally.
Right.
So, you've got to factor in some just random weirdness that does happen occasionally. Given that, so right now your stack size is about double the size of the pot, a little bit over that. You have about double what John Deere does for your chip stack. And I in game, I'd be very hard pressed not to call. I'd probably do a check call, hoping that if John Deere was going to value bet, it would be for less than his entire stack. But he basically has a pot size bet.
Yep.
And Jack brought up a point too that I was thinking about. So if he has pocket nines, do you think he plays this the same way, or do you think he would have like re-raised you on the flop or the turn?
Well, am I the one to answer that?
Well, yeah, I think, just follow your read. I mean, I don't know what he actually had, but I think, what do you think this kind of player, or maybe for the group, John Deere players, when they have a big hand, a lot of them just rip it in just because they're either afraid or they're so excited they have a big hand too. So I'm curious what you guys think. If he had pocket nines, would he just call here, flop and turn, or would he at some point try to get a stack in?
I think the John Deere guy may play pocket nines in this exact manner.
Yeah, it's very plausible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think his aces, he could be playing any ace, and the only aces you're chopping with now are what? Ace 7, ace 8,
Ace 3 and ace 2.
3, ace 2. That's about it. The rest of them are beating you, which is, and he could be playing ace king this way.
Right. Ace king, ace queen, ace jack, all of those, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the only ace I did take him off ace king because I thought I probably would have heard about that pre, but I think every other ace is probably playing this way. And I think I made the mistake of taking him off. Well, this might be spoiler alert time, but I made the mistake of taking him off like pocket nines. I felt like, well, I would have heard about this at this point. But surprise, surprise, that's what ends up happening. But anyway, so I check. He bets 65,000 into the pot, and I'm left here with a decision. I think I really butchered this hand, and I think that this is, with this type of player and this type of decision, with this big of a bet, I think it's got to be a fold. But I did end up calling. But I don't know what others think.
It sucks because, by the problem with checking, and I still like the check, is that you've underrepresented your hand. And so, a lot of players, that's a snap call for me because now they see that as weakness and they're going to take a shot with their missed flush draw. Against John Deere, the question is, would he ever turn his missed draw into a bluff? Would he ever, do his pocket kings or something later, pocket jacks? Would he ever bet those for value in this sort of spot? Like, is he capable of making a bluff or, a semi bluff like this? Like what are you ahead? Is there anything that you're ahead of?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is there anything? Is there any? I guess there's flush draws. If I can possibly put him on a flush draw.
Right. If you think he would just give up, or if you think he would take a stab on the river, and he's betting a kind of a weird size. He's betting 2/3 of his stack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, so part of the issue is if it's a true John Deere player, he may not have even stuck around for the flush draw, because with a paired board, he could be drawing dead already.
Right.
Right. And if you think about going, John Deere to the extreme, the worst hand I'd see him betting here is when you check, because you bet the flop, you bet the turn. When you check, the only hand I think the weakest hand he'll bet is ace king, because you'd probably continue with a full house. He's not gonna bet anything else just in case you have ace king. I don't know. It's a tough situation. I'd probably end up calling, but that's because I'm a calling station.
Rob?
I think John's absolutely correct on the John Deere, the way he would have played this hand. I don't think he would have stuck around for the flush draw. I think on the flop we were talking about, and the turn we were talking about the solid aggressive guy that might stick around for a flush draw. John Deere, I don't think he does. And if he does, and busts, he's not betting. You're going to find most of the people, there's fewer bluffs on the river than you think there are. Typically, when you get to the river and somebody puts out a bet, especially a bet like this, which leaves him with a little over, 11 big blinds, he's not going to put himself in that position on a bluff at this point in time. So he's got a hand, and to John's point, the minimum hand that he's going to be betting here is probably ace king, which has you beat.
Yep.
Yeah, I think your bet on the turn does push off most flush draws for even most players. When you bet 25K into 36K, I think that is going to get rid of most of those flush draws, just because of stack size and the odds that you're getting there too. So unless they're really sticky, I think your flush draws are probably out of the hand. Which leaves what then?
There's nothing.
Yeah, unless you just think he's got tens or jacks and just getting super sticky. And then on the river, would tens or jacks ever bet for value here? No, I can't. It's hard to imagine that. So it sucks.
Yeah, I think on the river we have 3 options for how we can approach the hand. We can check call, which looks like what we took here. We can overbet jam.
Yep.
Or we can blocker bet.
Blocker bet, yeah.
And I probably would have taken the wrong option here, given that he has 9 nines, but I think it makes sense for John Deerish to consider the blocker bet. Essentially throw out that same $25,000 chip that you did on the turn and do the old same bet, and then see what the John Deere hack guy does, because if that read is accurate, he's not doing any sort of raising unless he's got you crushed.
And so you would do the blocker bet with the intention to fold to a jam?
Yeah, correct. And go bet fold on the river. I'm not saying I'd actually do it, because I know I would screw up this spot and probably do the same thing you did, or just over jam, which would have been even worse. But I think, given all the stuff that we've talked about and the reads that we make, a blocker bet would have been the best option, because then we essentially set our price on the river.
Mm-hmm.
We can bet 25, 30,000, and if we get raised, we know we're beat. Because given this person, is there any chance that they're raising on the river as a bluff versus us? I think the answer is a profound no.
Right.
So what do you think John Deere does when you throw out the blocker bet?
Probably just calls. Right? I mean, he's scared to death of ace queen or something, right?
That's what I'm thinking. I think there's I would say it's about 75%. Just using a random John Deere, 75% that he just calls. So
I agree.
Which is making me think that the blocker bet that Taylor's speaking of.
Yeah. And Taylor, you brought that up before, the blocker bet, and that is just something I'm aware of it, but I just rarely use it. And I know in the past on this discussion, probably 2 or 3 times you brought it up in spots that I think, wow, that actually would have been a really good place to use that.
I only noticed it in hindsight. That's the thing about me.
Yeah, but it's every time you brought it up on the show, I feel like that's actually a very good spot to use it. Here, it seems great you get value from the guy who was floating with king, queen of hearts and hit his queen. That kind of garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And you just know where you're at when he raises you. And if he just calls because he's scared and he beats you, you're out 25 grand instead of 65.
Yeah, you saved 40 grand there, which is would have been nice.
It would have been nice. I think one thing that we need to make sure that we do here is I think we need to bring in the actual John Deere guy himself. George, if you're still on the line.
Yes, I am.
George, there it is. Yes. I didn't see that.
What kind of hat should you wear?
George, is this how you, now you're not really a John Deere guy. Now, this is part of your shtick for those who know George. But let's pretend, John Deere guy, do you play pocket nines this way? Do you call pre, call flop, call turn, and then kind of come alive on the river with this bet? Is this how you played it?
I think you let the donkey pull the cart. As long as he's betting, I'm just going to let him bet.
Let the guy that flop trips.
If you got ace 9 or you got a pair of nines, as long as he's betting, I'm just going to let him bet. I'm not going to show my strength.
So you're not going to check raise flop or not check raise. You're not going to re-raise flop or re-raise turn. You're just going to call both of those streets.
As long as he's betting the way he is, I'm just going to let him keep going.
Yeah.
You do the same thing too, Steve.
I probably would. I mean,
you did it versus me.
Well, it depends on stack size. It depends. Am I pretty sure that you're going to get your stack in by the river or not? Like, in this spot, it's probably pretty safe to assume. But like, yeah, I don't know. There are times where I think I would maybe re-raise turn if I really was just convinced that he had an ace and he's never going to get away from it. But yeah, let the donkey keep betting, George says.
I mean, to be fair, I do the same.
Let him pull the card. You don't have to push it.
It's a good strategy against me.
And I'm kind of, part of the reason I'm not re-raising here too is I'm hoping, the original opener had king, queen of hearts, and they're kind of continuing with their betting their draw, and I don't want to push them off of that. I want them to hit their heart. I flopped a full house, and I don't want to scare them off. What's that?
He has position on everyone. He can see what everyone does before him. So if someone's betting into him, like, he just keeps calling. He probably was really upset that the big blind folded. He thought he was going to
oh my gosh, yeah,
just stack the whole table.
Yeah, that's another of the power position here too. Because Chris, if you have that, if this is flipped around and pocket nine's open and you decide to defend on the button with ace five of clubs, I mean, at some point you're going to find a check back there. Right. I would think. Just position alone is probably 50,000 chips in this pot.
Yep.
Not that you could control that, but just sort of just another reason why I just love position so much. That's a good example. Any other comments on that one? I hope you still ran deep in the tournament.
I think this one kind of started my demise there. I was doing real well, but that's why I bring this up, because I feel like this is these are the type of hands where I feel like I'm running into trouble a lot, where I've got some strong value, but I run into something, and I think I'm calling too often with stuff that by the river is pretty clear that it's not the best hand.
Yeah, I think you played it fine up until the river.
Yep.
And I think Taylor had a great point, a blocking bet right there, and that's probably all that he's going to do is call that, even with his full house. And then you're going to, you're going to lose 40,000 less. But I don't know that you can get away from this hand without losing something.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, if you're not losing anything, then you're not prepared to get the value you should be getting out of it most of the time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, does anybody see anything different he could do? I mean, there's bet sizing things, but at the end of the day, your bet sizing on the flop wasn't going to matter in this spot. They weren't going anywhere anyway. So, like, is there anything that could have been done before the river?
Well, I think the bet sizing would make a little bit of a difference there. If the flop bet had been bigger, then when John Deere calls, it's bigger alarm bells.
Okay.
So that might lend you towards slowing down a little bit more. But that's true. It's a minor quibbling point.
Because you're thinking like if he has just tens or sixes or whatever, the price was so small that, let me peel one, see what happens. Maybe I hit my full house on the turn. Is that so? The range is a lot wider.
I think John Deere very well with that bet size, he may still have called with tens or jacks.
Yeah. Which is what you want, though, right? That's the problem. That's what you want. That is the give and take, right? The small bet sizes. That's why I like the small bet sizes, because I keep in the tens and jacks. What I don't like is I keep in the tens and jacks when they hit.
Yeah.
And I have been trying to experiment with that sort of small and the flop bigger on the turn, and that's kind of what I was doing on this hand too. But But that's a good point by John too. Yeah, just in terms of from a hand ranging perspective, the bigger bet is going to narrow their range. Yep.
Good stuff.
You want to do another one, or?
I would love to.
Okay. So this is another situation. We're in the big blind this time.
Good Lord, you're always deep stacked.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, is that
you always have 90 bigs.
I feel like I'm getting like solidly good at building a stack, and then I run into this type of situation. I just like basically don't want to flop trips because it's pretty scary.
Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm in the big blind. I got Jack 10 of hearts. This is another situation. It's opened by under the gun +1 to 5,000. The blinds are 1,000, 2,000. And we're 9-handed. I think I remember this is just the two of us. Oh no, the button calls as well. And we're both really deep stacked, and I've got Jack 10 of hearts, and I call. And
okay, so you and the under the gun +1 each have about 90 bigs. The button calls with about 45 bigs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the flop is 10 of diamonds, 10 of spades, 3 of clubs.
Woo-hoo.
Like, great. Woo.
Yahtzee.
Based on that last hand, I'm scared. So, I'm first to act, and I check because I want to let the aggressor do something. And under the gun +1 bets 8,000. Button folds, and it's my turn to act.
And doggone it, we're out of position again.
And
Yes.
just like John Deere, you're just going to call here, I'll bet. You want to leave. You want to get as much from him as you can. You're not going to raise. First of all, let's go back a minute. What do we put him on when he raises pre from early position and then continuation bets on that flop?
Well, I think he's c-bet whatever he opens with. I think he's c-betting everything on that flop.
Okay.
Go ahead. Who was going to say something there?
I'm putting him on a pretty. He was being pretty. He's solid, but he was willing to gamble a little. So I think he's opening with pair sixes plus, ace king, ace queen, maybe even ace jack suited. And I think he's continuing with his entire range on this flop.
Yeah, that's where I would generally put him based on what you've said too. Maybe, I mean, it could be a little bit lower, like ace 10, king queen, if he's kind of loose. It could be down to 4s or 5s, but I generally think the same way. I mean, do you think is he opening? Is he the kind of player under the gun +1 that's going to open suited connectors like your 8-7, 10-9 type of hands, or suited aces like ace 2, ace 3 that are suited?
I think for sure,
Okay.
if they're suited, and some of those hands would be in there too.
Okay, so his range is quite a bit wider then. So he does have a fair amount of 10s that could be in his range.
And he's not going to have pocket 3s in his range.
It would have been a pretty loose open, but I mean, it's possible with this player.
Okay. But he's still, ace 10 could be there. He
Mhm.
could have your hand in, well, I guess he can't have he could have your hand in clubs.
Mhm.
He could have ace 10.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think he's continuing with everything that he opened with. That's just such a good board to continuation bet, I think.
For sure. Yeah, I would stab at this a whole bunch of times if I was the original raiser, just because it's not going to hit the button and it's rarely going to hit our big blind defense range. I think it's an easy continuation bet for him, which gives him a lot of air in his continuation betting range.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and then the king of clubs now on the turn, I think, is a great card for us because there's a lot of his range will contain a king in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that means he'll actually have something to go after. Brings in a flush possibility, so he's not going to slow play too awful much, although it would have been a backdoor on the flop. So in general, I think you're looking like you're in good position here.
Yeah, I feel really good. And actually, I was thinking, like, when this card was peeling, I was like, I hope it's an ace or a king. So, I'm feeling pretty good about this hand at this point. But I check again because I want to I want to John Deere him. And now he bets big. He bets 35,000.
Was that a pot size bet? Is that what that was?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's exactly a pot size bet.
So is that, I mean, is he the kind of player that you think he's just continuing with this whole range, or do you think at this point you feel like he must have something?
I'm putting him on some kind of potential. If he doesn't have a made hand, he's got maybe clubs, maybe queen jack, although it's hard to find a lot of those, but maybe clubs, maybe queen jack, and otherwise he could have. I think he's got a lot of ace king, potentially king queen, and maybe some of those better tens, like ace 10, maybe even king 10, although I doubt it.
Does the bet sizing say anything to you, signal anything? He bets a full pot size, which sometimes signals weakness, sometimes signals I want max value.
Yeah, I mean, it polarizes him for sure. And he definitely, I think this is a I want you to fold kind of bet. So I'm still feeling like I've got to at least call this for sure.
Well, if I'm in your position, I'm still thinking I'm going to win a monster pot.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to look to see if there's a way for me to get more value.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your thoughts about clicking it back, about raising, or, I mean, is raising too aggressive and you're just going to scare him off? Or do you just call one more time?
Well, I mean, I like that. In retrospect, I think it's something that I should be doing more of and trying more of, especially on this kind of board, and especially where I think he has a lot of ace king, and I think that might be why he's betting this much. And I think, although I mean, I don't know if he has ace king, is calling this and waiting to the river to sort of have more aggression better, or is it better to do it here?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I kind of like I would even actually consider a lead. I don't love to lead into the pre-flop aggressor or whatever on the turn. I would consider a lead, just hope he hit a king, just because I'm so afraid of it going check on kind of a wet board. But the way it played, even the check, I mean, I think the board is pretty wet at this point. He's got a lot of ace X of clubs, a lot of king, or a lot of queen jack. You know, there's hands. If he were to fold right here, I don't think that's a horrible situation either. I mean, I pick up the 35K plus the other 17K. I pick up 52K, which is 26 bigs. You know, if I just raise him right here and just make him pay for any draws, or, you know, make it look like I have a draw too. I mean, if you just rip it in here, not saying you should, but if you just rip it in, what's he going to do with ace king? Maybe he folds, and that's kind of a disaster, but what's he going to do with his ace five of clubs? You know, I don't know. It's something at least worth thinking about, putting the pressure on him at this point, and, you know, maybe you just get it in. I don't know. I just the one. Sorry. My last thought though, just too, like if I just call here, I just hate the spot out of position, because now what happens on the river? The river comes, say it comes a blank, you know, two of diamonds. What do I do then? I mean, there's such a risk that it goes check. I just want to get money in while there's a chance to get money in, I guess.
Yeah, that was going to be my point, Steve. At this point, you can get money in when he's got ace king or he's got a big draw, where you may not get paid on the river if he's playing one of those kind of hands. So if you want more money, the turn is where you need to go after that to get that value, because by the river, his hand is either made or not, and he's going to either have you beat or not. And if he doesn't have you beat, you're not going to get any money out of him.
It just sucks because our stacks are so deep. You know, I mean, we still got 80 big blinds left. You know, you hate to just rip in 80 bigs and have him snap call you too.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because what's our sizing like on the river or on the turn here? John mentioned a click back. I don't know if he meant like a min click back to like 70K, or are we sizing up a little bit? Either way, it kind of leaves us with an awkward sizing on the river.
Right.
Like
And
say you go to 85, like then you've only got roughly 85 behind.
And are you ever folding?
Yeah. It feels like a weird spot with stack sizes.
Yeah, the only thing I could see when I said click back, I was actually meaning a pure click back raised to 70. So
Yeah, that's
right
what I
now,
thought.
for listeners, we've got 70,000 in the pot. The villain has 147,000 behind, and then we're sitting on 171,000 with a remaining 35K to call the bet that's been put out there. If you click it back, that's going to leave 100,000 in our stack and about 110,000 in the villain stack. There'll be 140,000 in the pot, so it makes a decent 2/3 size all-in bet on the river. So if your goal is, if you really think you've got the best hand and your goal is to get stacks in by the river, I think you got to do something here. You can't just call. If you're scared, or if you don't want to get stacks in, then that's not the right decision. And if you look at the rest, well, it looks like a lot of these sizes were just estimates because they're all the same.
Yeah,
Stack
the other
size.
stack sizes are just default numbers.
Yeah, the rest of these are all. I didn't fill all these in. I just filled in
Okay.
the players who were playing.
How is your position in the tournament compared with these two players? Because that's another thing to take into account. If you two are sitting by far the most massive stacks, an argument could be made for playing a little more passively and not trying to get everything in. On the other hand, if you are the two most massive stacks and you happen to double up through them, that's huge for the tournament too.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was one other stack at this table that had over 100K, and one of the things I'm not ever good at is being aware of the rest of the room. So I don't know what was going on everywhere else. But I'll tell you what I did. I called. I think this was a mistake. And the 4 clubs comes, which isn't my favorite card in the world. And I check here, but I still, well, I'll just let you see what happens. And villain shoves.
Gross.
So that's looking a lot like ace queen of clubs.
Does he shove that? I guess, yeah, this, I got to learn more and more. I have to learn that more and more people shove their big made hands on the river, because it's just different than how I play, and I get burned by this so much.
So on the turn, he bet a pot size bet, which is a big bet, which means to me screams it could be the flush draw, because he's trying to just take it down now with the equity in the pot. When you call, your hand screams, I've got a 10.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost impossible to put him on a backdoor flush draw that gets there. So, unless you think about it, right? So I could easily see him having the flush draw doing this. That's the type of play I might make.
And why not bet and just shoving rather than just going for 40, because you think if he's got a 10, he's going to call regardless. Right. Yeah. Okay.
I'd have to figure out if Chris is the type of guy who's going to call, then I'd probably do it. Against you, Steve, I'd rip, because you love to call.
I would have called with queen high here. I felt good about it. Oh man. Okay. So John, you see the rip in as a big nutted flush.
Yeah.
Or big
pocket kings.
Or kings, right.
Yeah, or he could have been, you know, a solid aggressive player is capable of making a bluff there too.
Right, that's the thing.
So,
You've got Queen Jack that missed or something like that.
right.
What if what is the villain putting Chris on?
10. I mean, he bet flop and turn. You just flatted both times.
Yep.
I mean, he should be a little bit thinking about you could have pocket threes, but there's just not that many of those combinations compared to random tens. You could have king 10. I mean, but that's what I think anyway. I think it smells like Chris has tens, or because I think even if you have like sevens or eights, you probably call flop, but you probably fold turn.
And what else? So when the villain bets, looking at it from the villain's point of view at this point, and let's assume right now he has a flush. We don't know this, but let's assume he does. Then what can he get value from? I mean, really the only thing at this point that Chris is going to call off with is either a flush, which he probably isn't calling the flop bet to hit a flush on the river.
Right.
Because he had no pair there.
Unless he had a 10, the 10 of clubs with it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
10 of clubs would do that. Or he had a, I lost my train of thought now.
Or a 10. Clubs are a 10.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like if he's got, particularly if he has the ace high flush, then it's not a bad thing to rip it in. I mean, he could be beat by a full house in that case, but I mean, the only other thing would be if he happened to have pocket kings, which the villain very well could have played pocket kings this exact way as well.
Except the turn bet seems too big.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
But yeah, it could be.
I agree with you there.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at ace king or that flush draw. And yeah, he can't really put Chris on a full house because what has he got? 10-3, 10-4, or pocket kings, pocket threes, or pocket fours. So it's a very, very narrow range of possibilities for Chris to have the full house at this time.
And I'm
King
probably
10
betting the river probably with one of those hands.
Yep.
Good point. Yeah, Eric brings up a point. You know, if our villain has a 10, what tens in his range do we beat? I mean, 10, 9 of clubs, I guess. But I mean, because we don't beat that. That's the problem, is that any 10 he has, if we think he's opening with suited connectors, he's got jack 10, 10, 9, that sort of thing. But the only suited connectors he could have with a 10 are both clubs. That's the tricky part. You know, we could say, well, we beat 10-9, but we don't if he's only opening suited connectors there because it has to be 10-9 of clubs, which is now a flush. So I don't think there's any 10s that we beat unless he's I guess he has ace 10 offsuit if we think he's opening ace 10 offsuit. You know, ace of diamonds, 10 of clubs or something like that.
But we don't beat that.
No, that's right. You're right. We don't beat anything. Dang it. I'm trying to find something. I'm trying to answer Eric's question, but I can't find a 10 we beat.
No.
Good point.
You think this villain has any bluffs in this spot?
I think Queen Jack is still a bluff. I think that could still be in his range because he's gonna. If we think he's opening with Queen Jack, we think he'd open that wide. Now maybe you thought he wasn't that wide. If that's in his opening range in that spot on the table, and we think he's going to see bet with 100% of his range, and then on the turn he picks up the open ender, and he makes a pot size bet. To me, that would all make sense. But it comes down to if we think he would open whatever he was under the gun +1 with Queen Jack.
Well, would it be Queen Jack suited?
What's that? Queen Jack? What's that?
Would it'd have to be Queen Jack suited, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's part of it. Some players would open Queen Jack offsuit there, but yeah, generally you would think so.
So it's either diamonds, spades, or clubs.
Right, and one of the
We
three.
have the Jack of Hearts.
And one of the three beats you.
I can see him doing this with the big ace with the ace of clubs as well.
Turning it into a bluff.
Yeah, like ace queen offsuit with the ace of clubs.
Yeah.
Do you think he would with jacks and queens?
But what? Yeah. But
It
if you
doesn't
think
seem right? I mean, because he has legitimate value in the hand, and at that point, you only need to check it down to realize whatever equity you have, unless he's absolutely convinced he's beat.
Unless, yeah, or if he thinks he can get Chris to fold a 10 there by representing the flush, if he's turning his pocket jacks into a bluff.
That's ugly.
Mm-hmm.
What's that, Rob?
I said that's ugly. I don't.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if we're pretty sure that he knows that we have a 10, then he's basically turning jacks and queens into a bluff by representing the flush.
That's where he doesn't go all in then. When you check, he checks back and you're done with the hand.
Well, yeah, I mean, most people just kind of, because of John's point or whoever made the point, they got showdown value, so they could just check back. But if they're pretty sure you have a 10.
Yeah, or if you have a king like that, when you call the turn, they have to feel like they're behind.
With jacks or queens. Yeah, right. Yeah, what are they ahead of? Right.
Well, do you want to know what happened?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm still not sure if I made the right play, but I did call and I did win.
Oh.
So
Ace king, ace of clubs.
Yeah, ace king with the ace of clubs.
So that's weird. Are they bluffing the river?
The flush. I think they're bluffing for sure. They're bluffing to rep the flush, right? I'm still. This is a hand I've thought about for a long time, and I'm still not sure if this was. I mean, it worked out for me. It's great. I had a big stack, but I think that's. I'm not sure if it's the right call.
I think it's a fold, but I mean, it worked out.
Yeah.
Boy, that sure seems like another spot for Taylor's blocker bet, doesn't it?
Yeah, potentially.
Or how do you see this as different than the other example? I mean, it seems like it's a pretty similar situation, out of position. Instead of facing, an effective 130,000 shove, we lead out for the 30 or 40 and fold to a raise. Or is it different than the other situation?
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because we haven't shown any aggression up until this point.
Right.
Yeah.
That is a difference.
It's a different situation than the previous hand where we were the pre-flop aggressor and the aggressor all the way through the hand.
Mm-hmm.
So a blocker bet there would make sense, trying to get that last bit of value out of somebody.
Because essentially what we want to do here is get them to bluff into us. That's our goal. It has been our goal the whole way, is to have them show aggression and we can just let them drive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so from the villain's point of view, do they think they're absolutely beat? Because we played it fairly passively, check calling the whole way. But with that board, it's scary enough. What else are you calling with? He can probably discount the king because if we're calling on the flop, there is no king on the flop.
Right, unless we're just getting like super sticky with king queen because we have two overs or something.
Yeah, I mean, so on the flop bet, he could put you on any pocket pair because any pair might call that particular board.
Yeah.
But when he bets out a pot size bet on the turn, then what can he put you on? Unless he's legitimately putting you on like queens, and he did that over bet for value, but that just seems so odd. And in a tournament, you really want to get more value than you're likely to see there when your hand is best.
So you're trying to figure out like why would he shove this river when he has this showdown value?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if to make sure that the villain was actually trying to bluff there and wasn't doing it for value. And it seems like he should have been.
I see what you're
But,
saying. Yeah.
Part of it's the label on him is solid aggressive, and I'm not so sure I like the villain's play, so I'm not so sure I agree with the solid part.
So you got the aggressive part.
Definitely aggressive. Maybe that's my fault. That maybe for labeling as such.
You relabeled him after the hand.
Yeah. Well, I thought Rob's question was a really good one, and it's ultimately why I decided to call. As I was thinking, I think he's putting me on a 10 because of the way I've played this, and he's trying to push me off representing the flush. And but as we've seen, like I did that on the last hand, and I called, and I was wrong too. So I'm not sure in these spots if it's always good to just hang on in these situations and sort of hope that they're bluffing like this.
What kind of image did you have at the table?
I definitely had been one of the more aggressive players at the table. I'd opened a lot. I'd won some hands with, some hands that maybe were a little questionable. So I definitely was seen probably as somebody who could show up with a lot of hands here. But this hand in particular felt different to me because I hadn't had any aggression in it. I had called just all the streets, so I'm not sure that somebody thought I was trying to make a play for this.
Yeah, that's what almost puts your hand more face up because of that.
Right.
I mean, if you ever re-raise or if you ever lead out here, they think, oh, he doesn't have a 10 because he'd never re-raise or lead out on a 10. Mm-hmm. This just feels like a 10 all the way through. So you're saying, like, so Rob asked the question, did he put you on a 10? And if the answer is yes, he must have put me on a 10, and then he shoved river, then what's your thought process then? If you think he's got you on a 10 and he still shoves, it's obviously very polarized, right?
Well, I know that everybody puts everybody on ace king, but when that king showed up, it really felt to me like, and the bet that followed, that the player was either there sitting on ace king or king queen or some kind of a flush draw. But I felt like if they had hit their flush, they'd still had me on their 10. I did feel like the shove felt too bluffy. It just felt like if I had hit a flush on that hand, right, as the villain, I'm not shoving there because I want to get some value for it. And so I was like, between that and between him putting me on a 10, I was like, I think he's got ace king.
That could very well be it. He wouldn't have put you on a 10 until the turn. And when you called the turn bet, you check called on the turn. Prior to that, you could have had anything. You could have had jacks, you could have had nines, you could have had queens, you could have any of those hands. So he wouldn't have put you on anything, but then all of a sudden he got top pair. Then there's a pair on the board, so basically he's got two pair top kicker. He's got the nut flush blocker, so he's not worried about that. So yeah, he's making a play on the river. It has to be, unless he was just blind to the possibility that you could have a 10 or that you would call if you had a 10.
Right.
How long did it take you to make the decision? Pretty much snap, or did it take you a while?
No, this is a tank.
And what was
one of those get the bag, get ready to go. Just kind of what.
You call as you're saying nice hand.
Yeah, right.
So I'm curious, if you can remember, what was all the stuff that we've talked about, but do you remember what was the ultimate one thing that kind of put it over the top? Was it well, I got trips and I just can't fold trips, or was it that just looks like a bluffy bet, or what was kind of the final? Was it his body language?
Ultimately, I was just weighing. I think that this player. I mean, to me they were polarized towards that kind of either have a king or they had a flush, and I felt like, as I was thinking about it, if I had a flush, I would have bet differently. And so it was the bet sizing. It was the shove that made me call.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if somebody's got a monster, just shove on me.
That's what I would tell people too. Because I'll think I never would play it that way, and then I'll call.
Right.
Yeah.
But so that's ultimately what weighted to a call for me, because it really, when I started to think about what kind of hands show up this way, it was pretty even either way. So ultimately that was my decision. And I didn't think that he probably had a 10 at this point. So I didn't think he had a better 10. Because I'm not sure if you had a better 10 here, you're not going to shove this river.
I don't think you're betting pot on the turn either.
Yeah.
Right. So I know it's a different situation, because here we were basically just being passive and just catching bluffs on every street versus driving the action with the ace-5 of clubs. But what are the merits, pros and cons of a blocker bet here, out of position? Both. I mean, it's a blocker bet, but it's also a value bet kind of too, right? Like, we don't want it to go check, and we also don't want to face a shove unless we know we're beat. Like, I mean, are there merits to a blocker bet here of, I guess whatever it would have been, 30,000, 40,000?
The thing that I struggle with a blocker bet here is, and I'll look for you to answer this, Steve. If you blocker bet to, I don't know, what would we blocker bet to, like 30,000, something like that?
Yeah, I think somewhere in that range. Yep.
Are you calling or folding to a raise?
I think I'm folding, but I think either way, I have to decide that in advance.
Right.
Like, I'm not just going to blocker bet and well, let's see what happens. I think I have to figure that out. And if I'm never going to fold, then, maybe a check is the way to go, because you really want to induce somebody to fire then.
I don't know if the right answer is to always check fold there.
Okay. Yeah. I think in this spot, I probably would, but I don't know that that's always right. Okay.
I don't necessarily have a whole lot of answers to why, but it just, it doesn't feel right to check and then decide. And even right now, I'm like sitting here trying to decide like decide what those options would be.
Yeah, I think if I was going to use the tank, I'd probably use it in that spot to actually figure out what am I going to do here, if I'm going to lead out or not, and make that decision right then, unless I really pick up on some sort of body language.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing about the blocker bet, in terms of not doing it, is our opponent does have a fair amount of bluffs here, and the blocker bet kind of takes it away. The prior hand, we didn't think our opponent would have many bluffs, and we really put them on like somewhat small value of hands. And I think that helps constitute a blocker bet, where here it's kind of like, if they're bluffing, we still want them to barrel off into us. Now, granted, we got it put into a real tough decision when they shove. We would have much preferred a smaller size. But I think we want to give them the opportunity to bluff into us.
Yeah, I have to think through like what hands do we think they have on the turn. That would kind of be the off the felt work. But like when they make that big pot size bet on the turn, obviously they're doing that with a flush draw. They got there. If they're doing it with a king, or what do we think they're doing it with? They're doing it with pocket queens, pocket jacks, that sort of stuff. And yeah, I would try to figure that like what hands, if we make a small lead bet, a blocker bet on the river, what's going to call, what's going to fold, what's going to re-raise, versus if we check, what's the risk of being checked back? Like if we bet 30,000, I think we're going to get called by all of their kings, all their queens, all their jacks, maybe even pocket nines. I don't know. Probably shouldn't be, but maybe, I don't know. That's what I'm kind of curious. Like how much value is there in the calls that we get from our small lead bet by hands that we beat versus, getting checked back by those hands versus inducing bluffs, like you're saying. I don't know.
Exactly.
I think that's
all great questions, but it's tough.
Yeah. You can't do it now. I mean, you can't do it on the fly. This is kind of the off the felt work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's sort of where it comes down to me. If I just think they have a ton of kings in their range, and if I think they're just going to check back if I check, I feel like there's a small value bet that we can make then too. And also if they just have it, if they've got the flush, or if they have a flush, they might just call the blocker bet too. There's no guarantee that they're going to re-raise.
Right.
I mean, the way I played, I could have king 10, could have pocket threes. There's a lot of things that I could have. So,
but if they have the flush, they almost always have the ace high flush.
Right, but
I'm worried about the full house.
right,
Unless
but
you
they
have
still
John
might.
Deere hat,
Right.
I think you're getting a raise on the river.
Yeah, in which case I think I can pretty easily fold. Maybe not easily.
Yeah.
I don't know if those. That's. I'm so captivated by the blocking bet from the last hand. I'm kind of looking. Are there other opportunities to maybe try to implement that?
The thing about those two, though, is that you've got to be able to have blocker bets that you'll then call, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because otherwise it's like so easy to just shove on you whenever you blocker bet. And then this feels like, I don't know, if you're going to do that, is this one of those candidates for calling? I don't know. That's where I get a little stuck on it too.
I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, say I have a bluff, which I guess if I'm in the villain's shoes, if I have a bluff here, or if I have exactly what I have, where I have a made hand, and if 5x5, if Chris leads out into me, doesn't that just take my bluff away? Like, do I ever really feel like I could bluff there? Like, you put in 30 into a pot that was, I don't know, 90,000 or something, so it's 120. Do I really think my shove's going to get you to fold? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you guys. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. I just feel like it takes the bluff kind of away, which I know removes a chunk of our potential value. But it seems like it'd be very hard for them to bluff over the top of a lead.
Well, what you're saying then is, if you do put a blocker bet out there and he comes over the top, you're going to fold.
In this spot, I might, yeah.
Because you're saying he has it if he comes over the top.
Because he's got it. If I'm him, I feel like, well, do I really have fold equity here to? If I make a bluff here, do I really think they're going to fold? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good thought.
I don't know. So I think it's a matter of we lose value from the bluffs that they would have made, but we gain value from the calls that they'll make that they would have checked back.
Yeah, he probably would have called a blocker bet and may not have tried to bluff. Now, as it was played, Chris got a lot more value.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, we can't count on this kind of thing happening.
Exactly. I think it's because well, I don't know. I think that's solid aggressive. I think he played it a little poorly.
Yeah. No disagreement there. You got absolute max value, obviously, out of the hand. I just think most of the times that ace king's going to check back.
Yep.
But they would have called. They'd call 30 grand.
Do you think king plays that way for most of us up till the river? Or would we play different all the way?
I think, let's see, opening pre-flop for sure, continuing on that flop for sure, hitting the king on the turn. I probably don't make a pot size bet, but I'm going to.
My bet's much smaller if I hit that king.
Yeah, but I'm going to continue there, and then I would just check back river. That's how I would play it. But I'm still probably playing lower variance style. I got 80, 90 big blinds to start the hand. I'm not really looking to lose 90 big blinds with one pair.
Yeah, I probably on the turn bet like 15,000 instead of 25.
Yeah, because you're trying to get value.
Right.
15 would be what percentage of the pot back then?
Like 60%. I think it was 25 at the time, 15 out of 25.
Oh, it was 35.
Oh, 35. Oh, so like 40% of the pot? Is that what you're saying, John? So you'd have bet 15 into 35?
I was thinking the pot was 25.
So was I.
20,000.
So 60.
Okay.
About 60%-ish.
Yeah.
So that's really the only difference until the river. And then if you had the guy, when he called you, you put him on a 10. You figure, if I'm going to win this hand, I need to shove, or you just check it down and say I'm giving up.
Well, if I only bet 20,000 into that pot, then I think hands that leaves in to me the pocket pairs. So he might still have, Chris could have 9s or 8s or jacks or queens. Possibility we're chopping with ace king, but I don't necessarily put him on just the 10 in this position, particularly given how Chris has described his image at the table.
Right.
You're talking about this under the revised bet on the turn.
Right, under the revised bet on the turn.
Yep. Yeah,
So
go ahead,
his
Stacy.
bet isn't necessarily a terrible move because it helps him range. It helps him get a read.
Right, but then you're basically just guaranteeing you're only putting in money when you're behind.
Yeah, I think you're right, Stacey. I think it does allow him to squarely put Chris on a 10. I think it does give him that information, but then I don't think he uses the information.
Well, he almost folded. Was what my point is. I'm not.
Oh, Chris did.
Yeah. So I'm saying here, betting the way he did, he's got that information, and all of us are kind of saying, well, with that information, we'd have definitely checked down the river, kind of feeling like we're beat, or he maybe thought he was maybe behind and thought, you know what, this is a chance. This is a scary card. I'm going to really put the pressure on, and even a 10 would fold here, maybe. I don't know.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, so if Chris knows that Chris has a 10 and he's still shoving river.
Which is what we were talking about before he showed us the card. We were kind of all surprised. We were kind of looking at going, well, we're behind all the 10s, and we're behind King 10, and we're behind
clubs.
We're behind every club. We're behind. What are we ahead of? We're the one hand he had here that would do this. So I mean, like Chris was. That's why he brought this up. Did he make the right call? Maybe. I mean, it worked out, but maybe the right move was for him to fold here, and that push on the king, with the ace king maybe wasn't a terrible play. It didn't work out, but I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so you're giving more merit to our solid aggressive friend here.
Yeah, I mean,
if he really thought through it and said, my only chance to win this hand is to shove, because if I make a half pot, 3/4 of pot bet, he's calling. But if I shove, I'm polarized. He's got to guess. Am I ahead or behind? And maybe just guess the guy will go away and live to fight another day. I don't know. Thoughts?
That's a good thought. What do you guys think?
I think that's kind of why I brought up both of these hands. I think correct. I mean, I called on both of these rivers. One worked out, one didn't. But I think in both cases, I think I made a mistake. I think in both cases I should have folded. But that's kind of where I was. And so maybe this is a really interesting move when you've got the ace of clubs in your hand and you got the ace king, and you know that your opponent is very likely to have a 10 because maybe they're supposed to fold.
Yeah, because you weren't on the club draw. He knew that.
Right.
So looking back at it, though, unless the only hand, the way the villain played it, the only hand that I at all liked the way he played would have been if he had the flush, had an ace queen or ace jack of clubs, because the pot or the turn bet, the flop bet, I think is fine. I think that was good. The continuation bet there, the turn bet, making a pot size bet into that pot just pretty much guarantees the only things that are going to call you have you beat. So you're almost guaranteeing that the only money that's going into that pot is bad. And then so unless you've got the flush draw and you just want to get people away, I can see that as a viable argument there. And then obviously if he had hit the flush on the river and he thinks that there's a chance you're going to call, he could consider that overbet. But even there, it's a pretty big overbet, and there is a possibility of a full house still sitting out there. I'd be much more inclined to go 3/4 or pot size bet. So given all of that, what I'm coming back to is I don't know that your call was necessarily all that bad. Something here doesn't add up. So in the way the villain played the hand, to me. So, you know, when you're adding up the pieces, then it's got to go down to your gut feel and your read.
And I think that one of the big differences for me in between these hands is that this player was capable of this move, and I think the other player wasn't. And that's why I think the first hand is for sure a fold. And then this one, I'm still not sure.
I'm not convinced it was a bad call.
Okay,
I'm not
well, good.
convinced it was good either. But I mean, I think there's enough ambiguity there that I think there's room for this to be a good play.
I just noticed as we were talking, before he showed us the ace king, our language is a little bit different. And then when it showed the ace king, it felt like it changed to now picking on his bad play. But before that ace king was shown, it felt like we were like, what are we ahead of? This guy's really shown strength all along. Is he on kings? Is he on the flush that hit? I mean, that's all we were really giving him credit for until we saw the ace king. And then it felt like our language switched to kind of picking on, oh, this wasn't really a good play of his. But if that's what he was repping all along, that's kind of the point you're making when you're doing a bluff, isn't it? I mean, he felt like he had us all tricked until we saw the outcome. Would have any of us called before Chris said it? It felt like we were all kind of heading towards, no, we got to fold, right? Or am I reading that wrong?
You're absolutely right, Stacy. You're absolutely right. You know, hindsight is 20/20. Now we're picking it apart because we saw that he had ace king. But prior to seeing that, nobody put him on that hand. We had him on ace queen of clubs, you know,
Yep.
king 10, something like that.
Like a king.
Yeah, although part of the conversation I think was also shaded by the previous hand. I mean, the way Chris presented it, it's like, okay, let me show you a few hands where my trips get busted. So, I mean,
Okay. That's fair, John.
That may have been part of the reason why we were coming at it from that tack beforehand. I don't know. This is a really complicated hand, and it's not obvious to me either way.
I think I said where I misplayed my trips, but maybe I said where
no, you did. But I think that's kind of where we're not used to people telling us good beat stories.
Right. Well, this is a hand I've really thought about, and I feel like you've got to think about these hands where you get this really great thing happening to you, but did you really deserve it? And should you be making that play, you know, down the road? And I'm still not sure about this hand.
I still think I fold there. I would never put him on ace king here, just because I would have thought I would have checked back. I mean, I think queen jack to me was the only hand I could think they're bluffing with there. Obviously, I was wrong, but that's kind of my thought is still, it's probably a begrudging fold.
Yep.
No, on the turn though, we did talk about ace king before we saw the club on the river. We were talking that, hey, he could possibly have ace king here.
Yep.
Because now he hit his top pair, top kicker. There's a pair on the board, but he's got two pair with top kicker.
Right.
And he's going to see if he can push you off your hand at that time in case you have the odd flush draw or like pocket jacks or pocket queens that could potentially catch up. So
right. No, I think for sure I put him on ace king was in the range when he bet the turn. But once we called that pot size bet on the turn, I think he obviously could still have ace king, but I just couldn't imagine him shoving river once we had called that big turn bet. So I agree that it was in the range until we called, and then he shoved river. Then I took it out of his range, obviously incorrectly.
I think he could only do this with the ace of clubs, but
that's stones, man.
Yeah.
I mean, the stones on this guy.
Well, if you don't get caught bluffing,
you're
not bluffing enough, or isn't that whatever the?
That's the saying.
Maybe
he rips in 75 bigs there on the river. I mean, to win 90, he put in 147. Oof.
That was about 1.5, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He might have just got caught up with, he was aggressor the whole way along. You know, I don't know if you guys ever get caught doing that, but
no, never.
you put in on the turn, you put it on the flop, you hit the turn and you bet, and then you're thinking, this has got to be mine, so I got to follow through. And maybe he didn't put much thought into it at all, have you on a 10 at all. He just got caught up in his own betting and just pushed.
Yeah, I've got ace king and I had a king on the board. I'm really good. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just as simple as that without even really thinking through what we had.
And then he looked down and goes, oh crap, did I really have that many blinds? After he shoved, he went, oh, whoops.
Right. Yeah. Once he shoved and you were thinking about calling, do you think he's like going, yeah, I want him to call. I want him to come in. What's he thinking there? I mean,
he can't want me to call.
Right. You don't think so, but like, does he think his ace king is good?
There's no way I'm calling that with anything that he beats.
No.
Right.
That's why I still think that Villain's play is just so odd and bad there. I mean, if he had just on the turn bet a 3/4 pot bet, then I think you get to the river here and it's pretty easy. I think you can just check for value because you're going to be ahead of a large enough portion of Chris's range that he may have called with. That because someone might, when the king comes, that's an excellent double continuation bet for the villain's hand.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, even if he doesn't have the king.
Yep, for sure.
I don't know.
But then once you get called.
Right, but if he had made a reasonable size bet on the turn, then Chris can call with nines, or I mean the stacks are deep, so calling with nines or jacks or queens or even 8s, 7s isn't a bad play.
Right.
Could just as easily have ace queen as ace king.
Yep, for sure. Oh, those are good. Those are good hands, man. That's interesting for sure.
Yeah, no, thanks for going over this because it's very helpful, and I've been trying to think about these kind of hands a lot lately.
Okay, yeah, no, good stuff. Well, any other thoughts on that deal, guys? Otherwise, we'll shut her down here pretty quick. Any key takeaways from that? No key takeaways. Just a good use of your time. Okay. Well, for me, I think it's once again, it's sort of the power position again. I think just not that you can control that all the time, but you're just sort of hamstrung both. Yeah, Jack's takeaways: don't play trips. Just open fold it. But I think the power position, just how much information you had, how much you could control the bet sizing and all of that. I still think that I'm super intrigued by the blocker bet on the river for sure the first hand, but even the second hand, I'm still intrigued about that concept and that potential, both from a pot control and a value perspective. That was super interesting for me. And just again, it's just kind of a constant reminder to me of a trap that I fall into. Maybe you mentioned this too, Chris, just assuming that people play the same way I do. Mm-hmm. Like if I have ace king there, I just check back all day long. And maybe I lose value in spots. Maybe I miss spots to bluff people off of a 10. But that's just how I would play it. So I never put my opponent on it. It's just another reminder that we have to try to get ourselves inside the mind of the opponent. I know John Somsky's always saying that. It's always good to say, okay, let's take it from the villain's perspective. And I think I need to do a better job of that. So that's kind of what I took away from tonight.
And I think what Chris said about the players getting a decent read on the players, the first guy, maybe he should have folded because he had that read. And the second guy, well, he still could be wrong, but this guy's capable of making this bluff. So maybe going with that. They can read.
Yeah. Other thoughts? All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks to Rob and Stacy and George and Jack and John and Taylor and Chris and Eric Anderson for joining us. Chris just joined. Chris New Talk just joined us as well here at the very end. But thanks to you guys. Great discussion. Chris, thanks for bringing those hands and walking us through that. I think that was fantastic. Just a reminder, go to RecPokerTraining.com. Check out all the information there. And until next week, good luck on the felt, everybody.